So, hello everyone on behalf of the Croatian Architects Association. Thank you all for coming. Um, as you probably know, this is the second architectural event this evening in the city, so thank you for your patience and dedication. So this lecture is a part of the series of events, both live and online, aimed at the promotion and reflection of the competition for the Maksimir Stadium and Svetice Sports Center. You can check the previous events on the official website of the competition as well as on the YouTube channel of Croatian Architects Association. Today, we are honored to host sociologist Fabio Salomoni. He was born in Italy. He holds a PhD in sociology from the Maastricht University in Brno in Czech Republic, and he currently teaches at the Koç University in Istanbul, where he has been living for a few decades. His research interests are the topics of migration, identity, memory, and the sociology of football. In fact, we invited him to Zagreb as the co-curator of the exhibition Stadi, Architettura, mito, or Stadiums, Architecture and Myth, at the MAXXI Museum in Rome in 2025. But before the lecture, I would like to invite Toma Plejc, the president of the Croatian Architects Association, to say a few words.
Thank you, Frano. Thank you. A few words. Dear colleagues, dear architects, dear friends, welcome to More Than a Space, a lecture by Fabio Salomoni. Tonight we step into highly charged question, the reconstruction of stadiums. The discussion could not be more timely. It unfolds a truly heated moment alongside the construction of the stadium in Kranjčevićeva Street, the current international competition for the Svetice Sport Campus at Maksimir Stadium in Zagreb, and the ongoing public controversy surrounding the fate of the iconic Magaš Poljud Stadium in Split, exhibited last summer at MAXXI. The stadium is never just a stadium, it's an explosive site of identity, politics, money, memory, rituals, and urban trauma. It's a space where a city reveals what it wants to become. Dear Fabio, we would like to extend our warmest welcome to you. Please, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, perfect. Can you hear me? Yeah, super. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be in Zagreb. I will say to be again in Zagreb after many years. And I just realized that the title is very, very long and boring, actually. It's a very sociological title. Shortly, I would like to speak about two different models, two different types of stadium. The one I call the 20th century stadium, and the other is the contemporary stadium. And of course, the issue of reconstruction, rebuilding, building ex novo from scratch, it depends. And space, more than a space, because I'm basically want to speak about not material buildings, or not only material buildings with engineering or architectural peculiarities, but the stadium is a kind of total social space. So a space which has a relation with a lot of different dimensions: economic, political, anthropological, cultural, and also produced at the same time consequence and outcomes on this dimension. And especially, I guess the stadium is more than a space; it's a place. So is a space with a lot of investment in terms of emotional symbols and culture. Very short introduction. So I would like to start with this picture for many reasons. So the first one is just to remember a previous version of Maksimir Stadium. This one is from September 90. And it's important because I guess the stadium is a kind of living device in transformation, in evolution during time. The second reason, and while I was working for this exhibition, I realized that in general architects like to show picture without human beings, picture with material structures, and just to remember that the stadium is made and full of people, different people, by the way, not only people there for leisure or for watching a match of football, but also workers. There are workers, people working in the stadium. And since I come from Italy, it was something we basically wanted to underline during the exhibition. There are also workers constructing building and constructing stadium, and quite often they are dying in constructing stadium. In Italy, in 19, for example, 24 people died. And recently in the Qatar, maybe you remember, Qatar World Cup, much more. So this is two general reasons. But there are a third reason. So a stadium means people, of course, but means also bodies, gestures, voices, movement, spontaneous or culturally learned. So it's a place full of people and transformed by the people. It's a place full of people and also, as you see in the picture, a place full of objects, different objects, flags, banners, scarves. These objects transform temporarily the space, first. They are there to say that there are people identifying with one of the two parts playing the game. And there are also objects, they have the function to make these people visible. Visibility, I guess, is one of the most important categories in the stadium. So people go to the stadium to see the match, to see other people, and also to be seen. And if you think at the role of TV and television in the last decades, also to this be seen is also extended outside the stadium. So people, maybe you remember some TV match where people are trying to be seen by the camera and then seen by people watching the match at home. This is also, I guess, this visibility is also a very important, is also a criterion for building new stadium visibility. There are some specific objects. Maybe for this one, for example, the red and white flag is a political object. It was the symbol and the flag of Lega Nord, Lega Lombarda was a political party very popular in the 90s and in some way also in nowadays. So the stadium and the space of the stadium is also a space where we show political symbols, we communicate political messages, which is absolutely one of the most important parts probably of the stadium. And if you think at this picture, so September 19, you think at this stadium, this space, few months before, so May 19, and you know, of course, better than me, you also see that in some way, the stadium is also the space where politics are made and historical events are made. Another symbol is this one, a banana, which is probably now forbidden from the stadium. And this symbol tells something else. This symbol is telling about what? About a kind of symbolic, theatrical battle between supporters. So, and also in this case, the space plays a very crucial role because this symbolic battle and struggle between different supporters of different teams is also possible because of the space. Since the 70s, the supporters are divided into different parts of the stadium, one in front of the other, and this being in front is exactly one precondition to have this kind of symbolic, verbal, sometimes not that symbolic, but very material and violent struggle. If you think in the 70s, in the early 70s in Italy, when the Italian stadium didn't have different sectors for different supporters, so the supporters were mixed, in some way the degree of battle, struggle, symbolic or material was quite lower. So the space is also very important in this sense. And also this space also tell us about the use of the space in the stadium. The use of the space can change. Nowadays, we have separate sectors for away fans. It wasn't the case in 19. So the entire sector, the entire south stand, I guess, was for away fans. So few fans for a huge space. And also, of course, this kind of use of space, we can also see this space as a kind of prison. Also remember us, the stadium has potentially also some characteristic of a prison. And sometimes it's not that potential is very real. If you think then more or less 1 year after this match in Italy, the Italian authority used a stadium, the stadium of Bari, to put migrant and refugees coming from Albania. They put several thousand of migrants for many days because it was the only place, big place, at the same time a kind of prison. So this use of the space is very important. So use the space to separate supporters means also that security is another important dimension of the space. And security means, we don't see them in this picture, but for this match there were probably 1,000 policemen and martial arts experts, water cannon and helicopters in order to guarantee safety and security. So security means that there are always the possibility for violence. So violence is also not only verbal or symbolic, but physical is one of the possibilities related to this space. In fact, this space, the space of the stadium, is a kind of is probably the only space allowing people in modern society to have some relaxation of emotion control or behavior controls. And then, of course, this can produce different outcomes. So in some way, the stadium is a, let's call it, ambivalent place because it's associated with positive things or emotions like joy or carnival, and also with negative ones. And it's something strictly related to the place and strictly related to the game. Also, the game is always about relaxing emotion control and increasing emotion and control. So it's always a metaphorical battle in the pitch, but also a metaphorical battle on the terraces. And I guess probably the last reason, which is for me probably the most important, is that I am in this picture. So I was there. I can also see my banner I brought from Italy at that time. And is anecdotal information maybe. But what is important is that when I see this picture, I can better understand that also space embodies and crystallizes individual and collective memories. I can, looking at this place, remember emotion, remember the event of the match, which was a high-risk match because there were riots and clashes in the previous match in Italy. So the UEFA declared this match highly risk match. So that's why a lot of supporters didn't come from Italy, only a bunch of them. And so the space is related to personal and collective memory. Also, all my friends who came that day remember quite well this experience, and this experience through the time became a kind of epic adventure. If you go to Bergamo in some supporters milieu, you can see quite clearly that the entire night are spending in narrating this epic adventure. But the stadium is, of course, a place, material place, crystallizing personal memories, but it's also a place where memory are objectified. I didn't understand if this mural is on the wall of the stadium or near the stadium, but it's, by the way, memorializing an event which took place in the stadium. So the famous match between Dinamo Zagreb and Red Star Beograd and Zvonimir Boban and the policeman. So the stadium, which is something very interesting to me, I'm working on this dimension of stadiums, is also a commemorative and memorial space. It's different way in which the stadium is a memorial, part of the public memory also. So this picture probably explain you why I'm particularly glad to be here 36 years after this match. So let's try to summarize very, very shortly, very quickly, the main characteristic of the 20th century stadium. First, so the stadium, what is the stadium? The stadium is the place where sports are played. Modern sports are a product of the modern society. Modern society, industrial society, creating separation between work and factory, leisure, creating leisure, creating also spaces for leisure. And the stadium is exactly the space within the urban fabric for playing, for sport and for spectacle, for free time. And if I have to describe what the stadium is, I like very much this quotation from Elias Canetti. So, in fact, the stadium is a kind of material boundary, material boarding, separating time and space of work and factory from time and space for leisure. You see this material separation between, this is Venice, by the way, this is the inside, the stadium, this is the outside, the city. And it's a material boundary, sometimes not that hard, you see. Sometimes there is, also Elias Canetti says that there is sometimes a communication between inside and outside, so the city can enter the stadium, and the people in the stadium can have aesthetic experience of the view of the city. So the stadium is made by different sectors. Different sectors means different price. In some way, this organization of the space is in some way, because there is not a direct connection, is also a reproduction of the social differentiation. So different sectors means different prices. The 20th century stadium is very basic in terms of structure, very, very basic. No comfort, maybe one terrace with a roof, maybe. It's the only sign of comfort in the 20th century stadium. And this stadium, which is empty, so what is interesting in the 20th century stadium is the stadium as a kind of ritualistic role, because the stadium is only cyclically open and used. Let's say every 15 days, I don't know, 30 times in a year only. So there is a kind of sacred character of the stadium as a part of a ritual taking place every 15 days. And for the rest of the time, the stadium is silent, is empty, probably not invisible, because at the same time in the 20th century stadium was a symbol of, was related to the local collective identity, was a landmark in some way, was of course a toponymy, because the stadium is also a toponymy. And in the 20th century stadium, the entrance was very easy. Buy a ticket just in front of the stadium, just 10 minutes before the starting of the match. Also, the security was very basic, very, let's say, primitive. Very primitive structure of the stadium, plus police. This is the stadium of Torino in the 70s. And what about the audience of the stadium in the 20th century? Also, Canetti wrote about male, so the audience was in majority male, from working class, middle class. At the beginning, it was upper class in England in the 19th century. Sometimes male coming to the stadium with sons. Very rarely, but not that rarely, also women. In general, the literature talks about women coming in the role of wife or fiancée. not independently. But the main transformation was between the 60s and the 70s when the teenagers get autonomous from their parents and they started to occupy different parts of the place and of the space and bringing new objects, scarves and flags, and introducing a new wave of taking part. They started to be part of the spectacle and to taking an active role as supporters. And in this group, there were also a small percentage of young girls. So this was basically a general portrait of the 20th century stadium and then these places. Of course, these young people brought carnival on the right, but the stadium is always, or quite often, associated to completely different feeling and emotion. So tragedy. This is Bradford in UK in the 80s, a fire. By the way, not all the tragedy in the stadium were because of the supporters, sometimes because of the structure of the space itself. In this case, was a state of wooden stadium. And sometimes because of some mistake in managing the crowd by the police or by the authorities. But both carnival and tragedy, joy and tragedy are emotions and feelings associated to the stadium. Of course, the stadium, we saw already the political dimension of the stadium. This is another dimension of the political character of the stadium. Stadium used as a stage for propaganda regime, different regime. This one is very recent, late 90s in Turkey. This one is from the fascist period in Italy. One of the reasons of building stadium in the fascist period was basically to have big spaces for physical education and for political propaganda and performances. The stadium is a commemorative place, again, has a name, sometimes brings people and events from the past into the public memory. In this case, on the right side is a former football player. Sometimes there are plaques remembering people died during a war. This was sportsmen from Livorno died in different war. So this part, the commemorative part, the memorial part, as the stadium as part of public memory is something for me quite interested. And the last question we discussed in Italy some times ago is if the stadium can be defined as a public space, is an almost public space because it's cyclically accessible, so few days and few hours every day. It requires a ticket, so you have to pay to enter, and is publicly owned in general, especially in Southern Europe. The owner is public, the state or the municipality. Quite different from UK, for example. In UK, the stadium were from the beginning private owned, basically, and of course, it's part of the public sphere because you can have social relation, communicate messages, commenting issue, political or social issue, of course, in a very specific situation under surveillance. We saw which kind of surveillance was related to the space of stadium. So this was the 20th century ideal type, of course, and then in practice we can see a lot of differences. But these are contemporary stadiums. The picture is from Turkey. Turkey is one of probably the most impressive example of stadium building in the last 20 years. Basically, during the Justice and Development Party and Erdogan period, Turkey built probably around 40 new stadiums, demolishing the old ones, the 20th century ones. In general, these 20th century ones were in the city center, inside, within the urban fabric. The new ones are first, as you see, in general, built outside. And I guess there is there are many reasons for this. Probably one reason is the stadium is also sometimes seen as a tool for stimulating urban development of new area of the city. Okay. The second one, for me, the most important, is also trying to keep this collective effervescence, this combination of positive and negative emotions and elements far from the city, far from the contagion. So it's much more safe to have stadium outside the city, which is also a tendency, not only in Turkey, but generally. The technology, the use of technology in new stadium is huge. For the pitch, this is Santiago Bernabeu in Madrid, this different level of pitch. You can change the pitch according to different reasons. So the technology is everywhere in the new stadiums, of course. And this is one from Peking. And it's very interesting because nowadays cities are competing for resources, symbolic or material resources, trying to shape their identity in order to be different from others, in order to get resources, for example, the organization of sport events, which are economically very important. So in this perspective, the stadium became very important as an architectural, so as an aesthetic object. So that's why a lot of what, I don't know if in Croatian you use the expression archistar, which is a little bit, but a lot of very famous architects are now dealing with designing new stadiums. I guess for architects it's also a new market because new stadiums are spreading everywhere, and there are also architectural firms specialized at the global level in designing new stadiums. There are few of them very famous, designing stadiums everywhere. So the stadium is an icon, the stadium as a landmark for a city in a post-industrial society is another element of difference. Before, the structure was very simple and the design very simple, quite often made by engineers. And also, the structure is changing. We saw a very primitive structure, terrace, and now we have these ones. These ones means seats, individual seats, everywhere. There are, of course, also compulsory. There are international regulations saying that there should be seats. And seats are two main functions, I guess. The first one is security, of course, because with seats, we don't have crowd anymore. We have singular individual and atomized individual who have a lot of problem in movement, for example. You cannot move easily when there are seats everywhere. And the second reason is commercial, basically, because this seat takes a lot of space. It means that the price of the ticket is also rising. Less people, but higher prices. And this is a very common situation. Everywhere is seating or new kind of terraces. New kind of terraces, these ones, a kind of lounge. This means basically a different experience of being audience, of being spectator, of being supporters, different experience on watching the match. Of course, this also means different prices. This also means different group of people who can afford this price and go to the stadium. It is in some way also a matter of selection again. There is one characteristic which of the 20th century stadium which is absolutely unthinkable today, the fact that the stadium is used 30 days per year for a few hours. Now a stadium should be used 24 hours, 7 days, always, also during the match day for many hours, more hours than the time of the match. It means that the stadium, the modern, the contemporary stadium has a lot of new different spaces to give the opportunity to audience to spend more time there. Restaurants is quite normal, I'd say. Now, actually, there is restaurants everywhere. Museums, they are kind of also the museum of the club, which is also the possibility to visit this place outside the match days. Store selling merchandising. In the 20th century stadium, the merchandising was sold basically outside the stadium, and it was part of the informal economy around the stadium during a match day. Now, no way, this is a kind of monopoly. The clubs are selling their gadgets, and it's a very important part of their budget. Incredible. Hundreds of millions of euro for the big clubs like Real Madrid or Barcelona. Now, football is probably became a very TV event or entertainment, and it has consequences also on the space of the stadium. Which consequence? First, new spaces for TV studios, post-production studios, place for journalists, place for cameramen. Also, some part of the stadium, like the advertising, which was also part of the 20th century stadium, is now oriented according to the TV viewer instead of the people sitting on the stadium. So all these changes are also related to the changes in the audience, new social groups, new social classes. This is a very important change. This is very interesting because one of the most important characteristics of the contemporary stadium, so the people is going there to have experiences. Of course, in the old stadium, the emotions were produced by the game, the player, or by the emotion or the symbolic struggle among supporters. In the new stadium, emotion, atmosphere are produced under control in some way by the organization. Use of pyrotechnics, which by the way are forbidden to the fans, but are allowed for the organization. Music, sounds and speakers, all these elements, we will see a short video after, they are producing atmosphere and experience. Even the carnival produced by the supporters in the 20th century, so choreography, or in Italian, or in French, Italian-French, le tifo, is now part of the atmosphere, is in some way is expected from the people. People from the other sectors are very unhappy when the militant group, the supporter groups don't prepare a choreography, because one of the reasons to go to the stadium is also to have this kind of experience, to see the choreography. Passing from one model to another means basically renovate an old stadium, building a new stadium in situ in the place of the old one, or delocate the stadium somewhere else. This is a process very interesting. I will show some few examples. But before these examples, I would like to underline one thing we didn't underline, unfortunately, during our exhibition. So that the stadium is a living device. So it's changing and transforming. The nowadays Maksimir Stadium is not that one of the 90s or the 30s and 40s. Example is my hometown, Bergamo. The stadium, the first version was in 23, built by the fascist regime. 90%, 80% of the stadium actually in activity in Italy were built originally in the fascist period. Only 2 terraces, you see. And then they add 1 terrace, and then another terrace. Then there are four different terraces. Then here there were athletic tracks. Most of the Italian stadiums were multifunctional, not only for football, but for other sports. But quite soon they understood that the only use for stadium was in Italy for football. And also, again, having athletic tracks is also a problem for visibility, which is, again, very important criterion. So this is the version without the athletic tracks, and they put new terraces to increase the number of spectators. And then this is the last version. This is one of the rare Italian new stadium, private-owned new stadium. As far as I understood, also Maksimir renovation is a long story, very complicated, very slow, and very conflictual. So local and national politicians, football clubs, of course, private investors, experts, which play a crucial role, architects or urban planners. There are many constraints, legal, environmental, historical, cultural, international regulation. Quite often is a lengthy process, especially in some country. For example, Italy is a perfect example. Turkey is the opposite example. In Turkey, the process was and is very quick. Of course, this kind of process can raise protest. It can transform this protest in an urban conflict. The actors of the urban conflict can be very different, can be social movements, political parties, supporters, fan groups, of course, experts. It's not less important the role of expert in this kind of things. So, in general, there is the possibility of conflict. I'm working, especially in Italy, with an own stadiums abandoned and rebuilt in the 90s. It's interesting. Why it's interesting? In general, in small provincial cities, one is San Benedetto. I don't know if you are familiar, it's central Italy. It's just in front of Croatia because it's near Ancona. And they abandoned the old stadium, urban one, very 20th century stadium, as you see, because of a fire who killed two people, two women, and so the fire and also the externalities. So an urban stadium can also have externalities, so create problem, traffic, police, security, also the lowering of the houses prices, for example, because of the stadium. So there was, at that time, a large local consensus about we need a new stadium. And the new stadium was built in the opposite part of the city, designed by an architect, Acciari. He won a prize, an European prize for the best steel structure in Europe in 1985. And we had also this model in the exhibition. So, at that time, in many Italian cities, abandoning a stadium, not demolishing, but abandoning a stadium and building a new one was followed by a large consensus, let's say enthusiasm, because we are modern. We are able to create modern things. This is, I guess, this has a relation with the general attitude in the society toward future, toward past, toward memory, toward the risks. So, large consensus. Basically no protest against the new status. But in 2000, so more than 20 years after, when the mayor of the city said, I would like to demolish this stadium because the stadium was abandoned, but they're still there was an incredible mobilization in the city. For 10 years, 5 association committees, foundation, local referendum, march, protests, flyers, objects, scarves, saying we cannot demolish our stadium. And also they started to commemorate the 2 victims of the fire in 1981. In the 2000, they start to commemorate the victim. The victim is the 2 women are on the flag. And this is an example of a march in the city. You cannot demolish the history. Because the stadium was called home, because the stadium was strictly related to the local identity, local history, local passion, local enthusiasm, not only history of sport or football, the general history. One of the people I interviewed said, we grow together with the stadium and the football club playing in this stadium. So the stadium should stay there, or if you demolish them, you have to memorialize part of the stadium, build a museum, build a space. I said few cases of successful protest against new stadium. This one is probably, for me, the most interested is from France, is Nantes. And the project was basically a private project, a consortium of different private actors who wanted to destroy the old stadium, build buildings, apartments, and shops, and then next to these new buildings, a new stadium called Yellow Park. There was an incredible mobilization. I guess probably different actors, supporters group, environmentalists, inhabitants of the neighborhood, local parties, political parties, all mobilized against this project. And in fact, they abandoned the project. And I think sometimes to understand why a mobilization is successful, we can also look at the general environment. And we see, for example, that first, the fact that it was private was important. Private, trying to decide the development or managing of our city is a problem. The second element, probably much more important, Nantes has a long story of mobilization for different reasons, for city rights, for urban question issues, but also for political ones, for example. But very few examples like this one in Nantes. So, last two examples of reconstruction in Italy, new, modern, contemporary, Bergamo again. So, there was a large consensus and a huge demand from the supporters for a new stadium. We saw the previous version of this stadium. We want a new stadium. We want more comfort, more modern. We want to be modern like the others. So finally, the club bought the stadium from the municipality, according to someone with a very friendly price, but it's a different question. And the problem was not to relocate the stadium, so the project of stadium relocation, so building a new stadium in another part of the city, were in the 90s, but quite quickly abandoned. So they decided to transform the old one. And this is an example of a legal historical constraint. This facade is the original one built in 1923 and was protected by law as a cultural heritage. So they transformed the stadium, preserving at least two facades, in fact. And they demolished the two ends, the north and the south, which were the modern one, not protected, not seen as a cultural heritage. The result is seen by many experts as very successful. I don't know, I am very curious about what you think. Very successful example of combination of old and new part of the stadium. And this stadium exactly has all the characteristics of the contemporary stadium. All-seater, roof, everything, very light materials, everything. But just two details to show that reconstruction and rebuilding is sometimes a complex issue. Okay, the other characteristic is the sponsor. Now the name, the traditional name is gone, and now we have the sponsor. By the way, it's very interesting as an example because if the memorial part of the old stadium, the name was gone from above, you say, from below there were, unfortunately I don't have picture, I have picture in Italy, initiative by the supporters to put on the external side of the walls plaques with the names of the supporter groups, names of former football player of the team, names of former sport personality, a kind of memorialization from below when the memorial part is erased from above, maybe. The second, last example is Venice. Oh, so Venice is the second oldest stadium in activity in Italy. First, the pitch was created in 13, then the terraces in 27. As you see, is a perfect example of urban state. By the way, if you know Venice, here is the Biennale Gardens, so it's a very strategic place. There is a city center. historical center, canal, lagoon, sea, marina, a beautiful Romanic church. So going to this stadium means, okay, have the match experience, but also other aesthetic experience. This is a classical 20th century stadium with a classical memorial commemorative site, but huge pressure since years from the supporters to have a new stadium. And what is very interesting to me, I discovered it just 1 month before when I went to one of their meeting assembly, is that this demand for a new stadium is related to the demographic transformation of the city. You know, Venice is losing inhabitants, and also means the demographic transformation of the profile of the supporters going to the stadium. So the majority of the supporters now in Venice are not coming from the historical center, but from the metropolitan area or even from the region. So for them, reach the Sant'Elena Stadium, the old stadium, is difficult. It's difficult to reach everywhere in the historical center of Venice. So they want a new stadium relocated in a different area of the city. Finally, the nowadays mayor got public funding to build a new stadium or a sport complex. And this is the project. The construction is already started. And the project is very interesting. It's far from the historical center, close to the airport. 2 pieces, the stadium and this one, because Venice is nowadays much more known for his basket team. So the owner of the basket team is the mayor. And so big consensus, apparently no problem, but last month, all the supporter group organized a huge public assembly, basically demanding transparency in the process of new stadium building, participation also by the supporter groups, and they prepare a list of claims or demands. So supporter groups want a new stadium, but they also want to try to change some aspects of the contemporary stadium model. So they ask for, okay, public transport, because there is no public transport going to the new stadium. You can reach the new stadium only by car. Second, they want popular stands, so low prices, no seats, safe standing places, which is also interesting, but we don't have the time to discuss this. Memory and commemoration, identity. They want the right to take part in the decisional process to choose the name of the new stadium. And of course, they want spaces, special places inside the stadium for the supporters. The supporters can use these spaces outside the match day for being together, for gathering, for a social reason. So the social value of being part of a supporters group. And they try to have, and they have actually some political mediator able to bring this claim to the municipal, the city council, but this guy at the same time says, okay, you want to take part of the naming process, but there will be 2 names, the one of the sponsor, and maybe you will able to choose the second one, maybe. And sometimes, there are going elections in Venice in 2 weeks, and now the question of the stadium is at the center of the debate, because there are candidates saying we have to stop the stadium, the construction of the stadium. And then there are all the supporters taking part against the political representatives saying we have to stop the stadium for different reasons. Okay, thank you very much for listening.